So what I've done is basically what I do in all is the same thing, which is how do you change or remodel organizations so that they set people free to do whatever they wanted to do. And as I started playing with all these people, it became obvious that there was the need for organization and discipline, all of these things that the other organizations had, but it was done because people wanted to. And so I think my big quest from that day to this has always been to identify what it is that transforms people from someone that need to be processed in an organization to people who actually want to. And when they have their own drive and their own decision to do it, how does that change entirely? At 17, 18, I was still playing in rock bands. By then, I had already started law school. There was already a dichotomy. There was a bit of a shock between the two things. And at the same time, my father was almost 50 years older than I. He was very anxious that I should start getting involved in the business and that we could be in the business together for some time so that I could take it over from him and so forth. So I started much earlier than I should have. And so I was at the company very actively at 18, 19 and so forth, and going to the university less and spending more time at the business. And on one of these days we had a discussion about the problem that people came late to work and what were we going to do about the fact that people were always late. And there was a deal with the union that people could be late 5 minutes a day. This was without any reduction in pay. And they were discussing how they were going to increase the controls so that people would come on time, and also increase the controls when people left. And they were putting in more modern time clock systems and so forth. And there was issues such as there was a line of people always waiting, and the line itself would take long, so that if the person was not late yet, they would be by the time they got to the time clock. And this discussion was there. And I kept thinking, I said, I come from this rock world rationale, which is I'm there because I want to be there. And I don't leave at the end. It's hard to leave because I like what I'm doing there. And here we're trying to force all these people from all over town to come here, stand in line, and control them every time more with a time clock. So I said, no, this has got to be, there must be a better way to do this. So on the one hand, my question was, why is this such a bad job or such a boring job that these people are not coming on time and they don't look very happy? So if I put the two things together, we're doing something wrong. So either we just happen to be in the most boring business in the world, or maybe the business world itself is not able to find things that make people interested. And so we said, let's abolish all of the controls over what time people come and go and how long they work. And when we sat with the union, the first reaction of the union, because to them this was very strange, they thought about it and they said, wait a second, we have to regroup and think about this back at the union headquarters because there's something wrong here. I don't know why you're proposing this, but it can't be right.
You cannot be trusted.
It can't be trusted. We don't know you, but we know business people, so this can't be right. You know that they came back, it was very, very interesting. They came back, and we had a meeting, and they said, and the two people who were there to have this discussion, one of them was Lula, our future, who was to be our president of the country 30 years later. We sat there, and one of the people called Vicentino, who's been a congressman and all this time. And they said, you know what, people thought about this, and they realized that what you're trying to do, that the trick here of what you're trying to do, is that you're going to do away with the 5 minutes per day that we have a right to be late. Because if we can come anytime we want, where are our 5 minutes? Incredible, no? And I was just looking at them and I said, you know, technically, I'm sure they were right, but I didn't know how to answer that. So how do I give you 5 minutes to be late if you can be as late as you want? And so then we started a relationship. It was very interesting because at one point we had to have a second meeting, and we said, well, you guys came here to the plant, so we'll go to the union headquarters. And they said, but no, no business owner has ever been to the Union Airport. I said, doesn't matter, we'll go there. And we sat there, and they took a picture. They said, the Union has existed here for 50 years, and in 50 years, no businessman has ever been here. And so we sat there, and we took the conversation further. After a while, they realized that this was not a trick, and slowly, people started giving in to this rationale. I think the answer to whether I know it's better or not is one that I've never tried to answer myself. And that's why I very much like the idea of trying to set something up and then go away. Because how people are going to maneuver that in the future is probably more correlated to what they think happiness is. So we've tried to ask these people whether they like this better than what was there before. If enough people are saying they do, I have to assume that it is better and not just a narcissistic response, which is I like it better because I'm not there. We have a few hundreds and now over the years many thousands of people who've gone through the process. Some of them have not bought into it, have not believed in it, have stayed a while and they said this is not for me. A lot of people don't feel well with so much responsibility, because it's also true that when you tell a person that you're not interested in how much they work or when they work as long as they get it done, to a lot of people that's scarier than saying you have to be here by 8:05, otherwise I'm going to fire you. And a lot of people have been conditioned, which is why we were always interested in going back to the schools, because people in the business world have been conditioned in schools already to sit down and shut up and listen, and I tell you this about American history and you spit it back to me in the test, and then I let you go. And so when they get to the company, they say, what do you want me to do? Be here at 8 to 10, leave at 5:05? Okay. But I think when you start freeing even these, almost I think the entire humanity, you start freeing them of this and saying, I don't care anymore what time you come and go. Can you do this for me? And I'm not going to follow you around to know whether you did it. That the great majority of people will. And the ones that don't, that's why humanity is so interesting and so diverse. There's lots of people who won't. And I think that this is a very interesting case that we had. We had a joint venture partner, which was in the environmental consulting field, and they were headquartered in the World Trade Center. And on September 11th, they lost 92% of their company and of their people on the same day. And this is, as tragic as it is, it's a terribly interesting sociological exercise, which is the question. If I have a company and 92% of the company dies instantly, do I have the same company after that, and how long after that? And this is an experiment that the world has never had. And so we watched this very carefully. And the fact is that some 8 or 10 years later, this was the same company all over again. Now, if this is true, it's not very good news for the corporate world. And I had said before already that if you take a big company, actually once in a convention in The Hague, and we were talking to people from Shell and from Philips. And I said, look, you pride yourself that you go to the best schools, you try to find the best people. But I would say that if you stop here in Amsterdam on the Prinsengracht on this corner, and you hire the first 75,000 people who come here, you're going to have the same Philips as you have today. And this is crazy for people, because they're saying, no, wait a second, I'm looking for the best. No, you're not looking for the best. When you take the best, they are too good for you, they leave. You need a cut of humanity. 5% of Philips has to be lazy. 5% has to be extraordinarily genius. 35% have to be happier in the choir or in the bowling school than they are here. Because that is the essence of stability. School does not have to be boring and difficult. Learning is absolutely magical. Every one of us is always excited with the idea of learning. School just takes that excitement completely away and transforms it to something that's terribly boring. But it doesn't have to be. The act of learning is wonderful. The act of working seems to be very necessary to human nature. The act of producing something with your talent is wonderful. The schools are set up for the comfort of the parents and by extension, the people who run the school. And that the essential object of school, which is to make learning a magical experience and to increase the retaining of knowledge, that is almost impossible within the structure that was created. And the structure that was created is one that makes it easy to manage large groups of kids. But managing large groups of kids is something that a club does, a concentration camp does, a prison does, and so that's why so many elements of these other entities are prevalent in a school. And the one which is to make it magical to discover new things, that's a minority issue in schools. So the structure is obviously wrong. What we're trying to do with the public schools is to make the public schools much better than they are. This public school that we took over is...
What do you mean took over? Is it yours?
No, we took over the management of it with a contract with the local authority. So we have an extended period, 10 years, in which we are responsible for running the school from a pedagogical standpoint. They have their teachers, they run the schools from an economic standpoint, along the lines of our concept. This school has a number of advantages over their other schools and has a relatively long waiting list at that one school. And if we were able, as we're planning to do, to increase that to 10 schools or 100 schools or 300 schools, we end up bringing up the level of a public school very much. And so hopefully we diminish the gap that way. I think that Holland, Scandinavia, maybe 8, 10 countries around the world are especially ready and prepared and mature for their own historical reasons to adopt change in organizations. You look at the social net, you look at the health system, you look at the pension system, you look at the amount of giant corporations for such a small country. You realize that all of the stakes are in place. If there's an economic downturn and there's a temporary crisis, it doesn't say very much about the structural situation of Holland, but one that has this disposition to understand what a post-capitalist society could do. Is certainly Holland is among the few countries that could make use of this leap of faith, could make use of this giving up control, because it already has so many cultural aspects and so many economic aspects to it from history that doesn't want to go back to running Batavia. You know, it doesn't run back in black suits and black hats and velvet things in the tropics. That's long gone for Holland, and it's ready with this amount of Montessori schools, with this amount of corporations that have a tremendous impact per employee, per GDP, etc. It's socialized enough, it's capitalist enough that it can find the best variations of this together. And I think what stops it still is just the fact that there's a cultural backlog, a build-up, a cultural that has to do with control still. And that's the very last one that has to go. But as a society, it's probably one of the ones that's closest